There are places in the Appalachians where the night seems to breathe, where the wind carries old names, and where the mountains remember every footstep that ever dared to climb them. Tonight we walk into one of those forgotten folds of North Carolina, a place where a man named Elias Thornwood vanished in the spring of 1911, leaving behind only a journal, a broken lantern, and whispers that never stopped echoing. But don't be afraid. We will move gently the way his story wants to be told, slow as mist, soft as moonlight on pine needles, quiet enough that even the oldest spirits might let us pass. And if these words begin to loosen the weight in your chest, if the calm of this journey helps you drift a little closer to rest, let this channel stay by your side, too. Stories like this return often, and you're welcome to return with them. Night has a way of settling over the Appalachians, like a slow exhale, warm in some places, cold in others, but always patient, always watching. And it was into such a night, one shaped by moonlit ridgelines and the faint murmur of river currents, that Elias Thornwood first stepped, with a lantern in hand and grief trailing behind him like a second shadow. If anyone in the quiet little town of Arden had been awake to see him go, they might have thought he was simply a tired traveler, a man seeking peace in the mountains. But something deeper lived in his eyes, something searching. Elias was 34 that spring, a gentleman, slight in build, the kind whose presence felt like the soft closing of a book rather than the slam of a door. His students used to say he read history the way most people sang lullabies, slowly, soothingly, as if each word needed a place to rest. And perhaps that softness was why the townsfolk had tried so hard to persuade him not to climb into Whispering Ridge, especially not alone, especially not after what had happened to his sister. She had been the bright one, the restless one, the kind who felt drawn to the edges of maps, believing there were still stories tucked between trees the world had forgotten. Her last letter, smudged with travel dirt and folded too many times, had arrived just a week before the news of her passing. Elias kept that letter as close as breath itself, pressed against his chest. Inside the inner pocket of his coat, it carried her final message, a message so strange and fragile that even now, as he stepped into the chill of the ridge, he could feel the faint tremble of her handwriting through the paper. "I found it, Elias," she had written. "Not a place, a memory, something older than us, older than anyone." He didn't understand it then. He barely understood it now. But grief makes its own map, and his feet simply followed. The first miles were easy. A gentle trail wound between hemlocks whose needles whispered each time the wind brushed past. The late spring air smelled of damp earth and distant rain, and although the forest rose tall around him, nothing felt unfriendly. If anything, the mountains carried a tenderness in the way they curved above him, like an old friend leaning in to listen. Elias paused often, not out of fear but reflection. He would tilt his head back, studying the ribbon of sky that threaded between the branches, and he would feel it, something quiet stirring in the distance, like a song too soft to name. He wrote in his journal the way he always had, thoughtful strokes of ink flowing across the page. The ridge feels awake, not alive in a frightening way, more like a room where someone has just stepped out, and the warmth of them still lingers. He was not a man who believed in superstition, yet, alone in that vastness, even logic felt like it needed to whisper. As dusk deepened, the forest changed its rhythm. Daytime creatures tucked themselves into hidden places, and the night's gentle choir began to rise, crickets first, then the low call of an owl, then the slow creaking of old branches swayed by a breeze. Elias could not feel on his own skin. The sound wrapped around him like a lullaby, soft and patient, guiding him toward a place locals rarely mentioned aloud, the mouth of Whispering Ridge. He knew he had reached it long before he saw it. The air grew cooler. The trees leaned closer together, their trunks forming a narrow passage that felt less like a trail and more like a threshold. Moss thickened underfoot, softening every step, and somewhere above, a single leaf fell slowly, so slowly it seemed to float on invisible hands. Elias lifted his lantern. Its light painted the world gold and shadowed, flickering softly across the entrance of the ridge. The rocks there carried marks, shallow grooves worn not by nature, but by intention, Spirals, slanted lines, loops that seemed to drift like strands of hair. They weren't carved deeply. They were almost timid, as if whoever made them didn't want the mountain to notice. He reached out with hesitant fingers and traced one. Warm. The stone was warm. He pulled his hand back, heart tightening, not with fear, but with a strange tenderness, as if the ridge had just whispered something only he could hear. He checked his sister's letter again, folded, smoothed, read by lantern glow. She had written of symbols, too. Symbols she believed were older than the settlers, older than the native tribes, older than even the oldest oral stories. Symbols she claimed matched. Something in a dream she had as a child, a dream she used to tell Elias about when they were small, enough to share a blanket under their grandmother's porch. The figures in the trees, Eli, the ones that hum when everything else is quiet. He had forgotten that memory for years, lost beneath adult worries. But the moment he stepped closer to the ridge, he remembered her voice perfectly, clear as the hush of wind through pine. Elias breathed in the cool night and let the memory settle. For the first time since she died, he didn't feel alone. He walked forward. Inside the ridge, the world dimmed, not from darkness, but from depth. The trees grew taller, the air stiller, the earth damp with hidden springs. His lantern flickered, against stones shaped like ribs of some ancient sleeping creature. And beneath everything, woven faintly through the quiet, he heard it. A hum, soft, low, layered, like voices drifting upward from the deep soil. He stopped, closed his eyes, and listened. The sound wasn't frightening. It was gentle, almost sorrowful. The kind of sound someone might make when remembering a name. They haven't spoken in a long time. And in that moment, Elias Thornwood felt certain of one thing. His sister had stood here too. And whatever she found was waiting for him as well. The ridge breathed, and he breathed with it. Elias moved deeper into the ridge as though stepping into a memory he didn't know he had. The lantern light trembled, brushing over tree trunks so tall they seemed to vanish into darkness, their bark lined with pale streaks of moonlight. Here, sound behaved differently. Footsteps landed softer. The distant hum grew richer. The night pressed close, but not unkindly, the way a heavy quilt settles across a weary body. He walked slowly, letting the forest set the pace. His breath fogged lightly in the cooling air, and each exhale felt like a quiet offering to the mountains around him. With every step, the grief he had carried for weeks loosened its hold, not disappearing, but becoming something he could hold without shaking. After perhaps an hour, Elias stopped near a fallen tree covered in a thick blanket of moss. Its trunk had hollowed with age, leaving a dark archway that glowed faintly with fireflies drifting around its edges. He set his lantern down, leaning against the smooth curve of the trunk. It was then he noticed something peculiar, rows of tiny carvings lining the bark. Not symbols, not letters, shapes, hands, small ones, tiny as a child's, dozens of them. Handprints pressed into the softened wood as though someone long ago had traced them with patient fingers. Elias ran his thumb across one print. It fit perfectly into the palm of his own hand, as if the tree remembered every person who had ever paused here. A wave of warmth rolled through him, gentle as a sigh. He pulled out his journal and wrote, "There is comfort here, not like home, more like the feeling just before sleep, when the world blurs and softens. Someone has been here, many someones, and they were not afraid." As he closed the journal, a faint rustling sounded behind him, light, deliberate, coming from the undergrowth. Elias froze, not in fear but curiosity. The night had its own heartbeat, and something within it was drawing closer. He lifted the lantern, watching light ripple across ferns and fallen leaves. The rustling stopped. "Hello?" he murmured softly, not expecting a reply. Silence answered him, but it was not empty. It felt watchful, attentive. He stayed still a moment longer, then released a slow, steady breath. Whatever moved in the shadows was not rushing him. If anything, it seemed to be waiting to see what he would do. Elias, exhausted from the long day, chose patience. He kept walking. The trail narrowed as the trees grew denser, roots weaving across the ground like thick, crooked fingers. He stepped carefully, lantern held low. The hum that had followed him since entering the ridge grew stronger, now more rhythmic, more alive, the way the distant sea sounds when heard from the inside of a shell. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time felt slippery in the ridge, stretching and folding as if shaped by the landscape itself. Eventually, Elias reached a point where the trail split, not left or right, but upward and downward. Upward lay a rocky incline speckled with moonflower, vines glowing faintly with pale luminescence. The air above it shimmered with drifting pollen, soft as floating dust. Downward, the path curved into a darker hollow, where the hum grew both louder and deeper, carrying faint trails of harmony, more voices, more tones, like an ancient lullaby sung beneath the soil. Elias stood between the two, lantern flickering in indecision. His heart leaned downward. His breath leaned upward. But his sister's letter, her fragile, trembling script, pulled him toward the hollow. "Follow the sound," she had written. "It knows our name." And so he descended. The deeper he went, the more the forest enclosed around him. The air thickened with damp. Earthy fragrance, wet stone, cedar, the faint sweetness of blooming trillium. The hum now vibrated through his very chest. Not loud, but steady like a second heartbeat. Finally, the trees opened into a small clearing, illuminated not by the moon, but by something stranger, soft, wavering light drifting through the air like strands of floating silk. Elias lifted his lantern, but it was useless here. The clearing glowed with its own quiet breath. At the center stood a stone, smooth, rounded, ancient, with a shallow bowl carved into its top. Inside the bowl rested water so still it looked like polished glass. The shimmering air above it quivered with faint traces of light, creating ripples across the surface, even though no wind touched it. Elias approached with reverent slowness. The stone felt warm beneath his fingertips, the same warmth he felt at the entrance to the ridge. He leaned closer, peering into the water. At first he saw only his reflection, tired eyes, wind-ruffled hair, a hint of sadness he hadn't yet shaken. But then the reflection changed. The lines of his face softened, blurred, shifted. A second face formed beside his own. A woman's gentle eyes, tired smile. His sister. Elias inhaled sharply, stumbling back a step. The reflection snapped away like a candle flame in wind, leaving the water smooth once more. His lantern flickered violently, then steadied. For a long moment he stood still, tears blurring the glow of fireflies. He whispered her name into the clearing so quietly that only the stone could hear it. Something moved. Not behind him. Not in the trees. Beneath the ground. A slow, rolling tremor passed through the earth, subtle enough that anyone else might have dismissed it as imagination. But Elias felt it. The ridge had exhaled, answered, acknowledged. He knelt beside the stone again, pressing his hand gently to its surface. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm listening." The hum deepened, circling him like a soft embrace, and for the first time since entering the mountains, Elias didn't feel like he was searching for something. He felt like he had been found. The night settled closer. The clearing dimmed. The glowing air softened, and the ridge, patient and ancient, waited for him to take the next step. The clearing lingered behind, Elias like a held breath as he stepped once more into the trees. He did not hurry. The forest no longer felt like a place he was passing through. It felt like a place that had begun walking with him. Shadows folded gently around him, soft-edged and swaying with the rhythm of branches overhead. Somewhere in the distance, the hum continued, though softer now, as if giving him space to think. He walked in silence, lantern bobbing lightly with each step. The night was warmer here, the wind calmer. The world so still he could hear the faint rustle of moth wings brushing past his coat. He felt no need to write in his journal. His thoughts settled quietly, like leaves falling into water. After some time, the trail sloped into a narrow ravine lined with smooth gray stones. The air grew cooler again and the canopy above thickened, allowing only faint ribbons of moonlight to trickle through. Elias paused to look upward, watching how the pale light drifted across the leaves like silver dust. There was a softness to the moment, a hush that felt almost sacred. It was then he noticed footprints. Not deep prints like a large animal, no. These were small, gentle impressions in the damp earth, each one shaped like a human foot, barefoot, light, as though the person who made them weighed almost nothing. The prints led forward, curving along the ravine. Elias studied them carefully, lowering his lantern close to the ground. The edges of each print were crisp, untouched by rain or wind. They were recent. He swallowed, not in fear, but in a strange mix of wonder and recognition. Something inside him whispered that whoever left those footprints already knew he was coming. He followed. The prints wove up the ravine, occasionally fading into ferns before appearing again farther ahead. The lantern's glow glimmered against stones slick with dew, casting little halos of gold light in the darkness. Elias's breath formed small clouds as he walked, and with every exhale the woods seemed to lean in closer. Eventually, the ravine opened into a small plateau. The footprints ended abruptly, as though the person had simply vanished into thin air. Elias lifted the lantern higher, scanning the space. The plateau held nothing unusual, just fallen branches, patches of moss, and the faint shimmer of frost catching moonlight. He stepped forward, searching for more signs, and that was when he heard it. A voice. Faint, whispered, so soft it barely disturbed the air. It wasn't words, not the kind he could understand. More like a hum shaped into breath, a tone that rose and fell with slow, calming steadiness. Elias turned slowly, holding the lantern out in front of him. His heart thudded gently, not with fear, but with a deep, heavy ache he couldn't explain. The voice came again. A second hum joined it. Then a third. Elias lifted the lantern toward the trees, expecting, hoping to see someone. But the forest remained still. No movement. No silhouettes. Only sound, a weaving of soft human tones drifting from all around, like threads of melody pulled through the night. He closed his eyes. The humming settled into something. Familiar. An echo he thought he had. Forgotten long ago. When he was younger, his mother would hum a tune at dusk. Something her mother had hummed before her. A tune without words, meant not for singing but for remembering. Elias had never understood the melody's origin. But now, hearing those layered voices, he felt the tune return to him. Not exactly the same, but close enough that his chest tightened with recognition. He whispered into the stillness. "Who are you?" The voices quieted, softening into the faintest of breaths. Then behind him, a twig snapped lightly, too gentle to be threatening, too deliberate to be the wind. Elias turned. A figure stood at the tree line, only partially illuminated by the lantern. A person, smaller than him, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl woven from leaves and thin strips of bark. Their hair was long and dark, falling over their shoulders, blending almost seamlessly with the shadows. Elias froze, not from fear but awe. The figure didn't move toward him, didn't speak, didn't raise a hand. They simply watched him with calm, steady eyes that reflected the lantern's glow like polished amber. Eyes that held neither hostility nor fear, only quiet understanding. Elias took a slow step forward, careful not to startle them. "My name is Elias," he whispered. I'm looking for my sister." The figure tilted their head slightly, as though trying to understand his words. The shawl around their shoulders rustled, gently as a breeze slipped between the trees. The figure lifted a hand, small, delicate, and placed it against their own heart. Then they pointed softly toward the deeper forest. Elias's breath caught. "You know where she went," he murmured. The figure didn't nod, didn't speak. But the gesture was enough. Elias felt more certainty in that simple movement than he had felt in weeks. He stepped closer, but before he could reach the tree line, the figure turned, slowly, gracefully, and slipped into the shadows. Not running, not fleeing, just moving with the same ease as a falling leaf, disappearing into the deeper dark between the pines. Elias hurried forward, but when he reached the spot where the figure had stood, there was nothing. No footprints, no sound, only the soft echo of the humming fading deeper into the ridge. He stood there for a long moment, letting the silence settle around him again. Then he lifted his lantern and whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, "I'm getting close." The ridge felt it too. The air grew warmer, breathing around him like a living presence. And somewhere far ahead, the hum rose again, calling him onward, calling him home. Elias Thornwood stepped into the dark and followed. Morning in Whispering Ridge did not arrive the way mornings do in the ordinary world. It didn't burst across the horizon or push through the branches with bright certainty. Instead, light crept in slowly, soft, diluted as if the sun itself needed permission to touch this part of the forest. Elias. Thornwood opened his eyes to a haze of silver light filtering through tall pines. His lantern now only a dim memory in the cool air. He wasn't sure when he had fallen asleep. Perhaps it was after following the faint echo of humming deeper into the woods, or after he'd sat under the twisting branches of an old cedar, letting exhaustion settle into his bones until the night simply wrapped him up and lulled him into rest. What he did know was that when he awoke, the forest felt different. Not dangerous, never that, but expectant, as though the ridge knew he was now ready to see what it had kept hidden. Elias sat up quietly, touching the bark of the cedar beside him. Its trunk was warm, pulsing with the same gentle heat he had felt on the carved stones earlier. The warmth steadied him, grounding him in the moment. He collected his journal, dusted off his coat, and breathed deeply. The hum that had guided him the night before had softened into something lighter, a faint breeze, a distant song too far away to fully hear. It drifted toward him from the east, through a narrow split in the trees. He didn't question it. He simply followed, as though the forest itself had taken his hand. The path ahead was almost invisible, just a faint depression in the earth, softened by years of fallen leaves. Moss clung to the stones, and small white mushrooms sprouted at the bases of birch trees. Sunlight flickered in thin beams, catching dust motes that drifted lazily through the air. Elias walked slowly, not wanting to disturb the stillness, letting the rhythm of the ridge guide his steps. After some time, he noticed subtle signs, things most eyes would have passed without a second thought. A bundle of dried herbs tied with woven grass and hung low on a branch. A cluster of river stones arranged in a tiny spiral at the foot of an oak. A piece of reed bent into a simple knot and left on a patch of moss. They were offerings, perhaps, or boundaries, or messages. He felt watched again, though not with suspicion. It was more like someone was gently observing, curious about him, deciding if he was ready to be trusted. Elias didn't speak aloud, but his thoughts formed a kind of quiet assurance. I mean no harm. I am only searching for the truth, and something in the forest seemed to soften at that. The trail curved sharply, leading him to a ridge of dark stone rising like a sleeping giant from the earth. Vines draped down its sides like long strands of hair. Elias rested his hand against the stone, reveling once again in that faint living warmth. Then he followed the ridge's curve until he reached a narrow pass, an opening, so subtle he might have missed. It had the morning light not caught the edges just so. Beyond the pass, the air changed. It grew sweeter, warmer, thick with the sense of rosemary and wild mint. Elias stepped through, and the forest opened into a hollow so serene it felt untouched by time. The ground dipped into a shallow valley ringed with towering trees whose bark glowed softly with amber undertones. Thin trails of smoke curled upward from small stone chimneys barely visible through the trees. Cabins, modest, tucked into the landscape, with such natural ease they almost seemed grown rather than built, rested, at gentle angles, each one shaped from timber darkened by years of smoke and rain. Elias froze, breath caught in his chest. He had found it. Or rather, he had been allowed to find it. The hidden hollow. For a moment, he simply stood there, absorbing the quiet hum of life drifting through the valley. Birds chattered in the branches overhead. Water trickled softly over rocks where a stream wound its way between cabins. Lanterns hung outside doorways, unlit but swaying slightly with the breeze. It all felt impossibly calm, like a place suspended between waking and dream. Then he saw them. 3 figures standing at the edge of the hollow, half-shadowed by the trees. 2 adults, 1 child, all barefoot, all dressed in simple earth-colored garments woven from wool and bark fibers. Their hair was long, dark, falling loose around shoulders and backs. They watched him without fear, without even surprise, as if they had known all along he was coming. Elias raised a hand in a gentle greeting, unsure if the gesture would be understood. The smallest figure, the child, stepped forward first. Her eyes were large and warm, a deep brown that glimmered like the rich soil after rain. She tilted her head, studying him with the quiet curiosity of a fawn. Then she smiled, slowly, shyly, and placed her palm to her chest. just as the shadowed figure the night before had done. Elias's heart softened. He mirrored her gesture, palm against his chest. One of the adults, a woman with streaks of silver in her hair, stepped closer. Her expression was calm, serene, as though she carried decades of silence within her. When she spoke, her voice was low, gentle, touched with an accent that sounded centuries old. "You walked through the ridge without turning back," she said. "Not many do." Elias swallowed, unsure whether to bow or nod. He chose honesty instead. "I didn't come to intrude," he whispered. "My sister. She came this way?" "I'm trying to understand why." The woman's eyes softened. Pain flickered there, brief, quiet, but unmistakable. "You carry her grief," she murmured. "And her echo." Elias felt his breath falter. "You knew her?" he whispered. The woman stepped aside, motioning for him to follow. "There is much you must hear," she said softly. "Much your family has forgotten. Come, the hollow remembers." Elias stepped forward. The hidden hollow exhaled, as if opening its heart to him, and the ridge, ancient and patient, watched from the shadows. Elias followed the woman deeper into the hollow, moving slowly, almost reverently, as if stepping across the threshold of a long-forgotten dream. The ground here felt different under his boots, softer, warmer, almost cushioned by generations of footsteps that had shaped paths without ever carving them. Smoke from the chimneys drifted in thin shimmers above the cabins, and the air smelled gently of herbs, lavender, sage, and something sweet he could not quite name. The people of the hollow moved quietly, not silently as some might imagine, but with intention. Every gesture seemed softened by time, every footstep mindful of the earth beneath it. A man carrying bundles of firewood nodded to the woman guiding Elias, offering a warm, wordless acknowledgement. Two children sat near a shallow stream, weaving small figures from thin willow strands, their voices low and melodic as they whispered little songs to each other. None of them stared at Elias with alarm or suspicion. Instead, they regarded him the way one regards a guest who was always meant to arrive, just later than expected. The woman led him toward a circular stone hearth at the center of the valley. Its fire was small, steady, burning with unusual blue-tinged flames that gave off a gentle warmth rather than heat. Around the hearth sat several elders, their faces weathered not by hardship, but by years of quiet contemplation. They looked up as Elias approached, their eyes reflecting the firelight with soft amber glimmers. The silver-haired woman motioned for Elias to sit beside her. He lowered himself onto the smooth, warm stones, marveling at how comforting they felt against the cool morning air. One of the elders, an older man with hair as white as frost, studied Elias with a gaze so calm it soothed something deep inside him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, carrying an old cadence, almost like a hymn. "You walk with a sorrow that isn't fully yours," he said. "And yet, you carry it as though it were meant for you." Elias swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. He felt the weight of his sister's letter pressing gently against his chest. He reached up, fingers brushing the outline through the fabric. "My sister," he whispered. She came here, or near here. I don't know why. I don't know what she was looking for." He paused, voice softening. "I only know she wrote that she had found something our family had forgotten." The elders exchanged slow, meaningful glances. The silver-haired woman lowered her gaze to the fire. "Your sister had a listening heart," she murmured. "She heard things most people have forgotten how to hear." Elias frowned slightly. "What things?" The woman didn't reply immediately. Instead, she reached into a small carved box beside her and withdrew a woven charm, small, delicate, made of braided reeds and fibers. It resembled the figures he had seen throughout the ridge. She placed it gently into his hands. "This," she said softly, "is called a remembering knot. It is left where echoes gather. Your sister found many of these, more than we expected." Elias turned the charm slowly between his fingers. It felt both fragile and timeless, as though made not by one person, but by generations of hands repeating a ritual older than memory itself. "She said she found a memory," Elias whispered. "Something older than us." The man with frost-white hair leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Most who wander into Whispering Ridge seek answers," he said. "A few come seeking peace. But some. He paused, letting the fire crackle softly between them. I'm come because the ridge remembers their name. Elias felt a strange shiver move through him, not cold, not fear, but recognition. He opened his journal on his lap, flipping to a page where he had scribbled a line in hurried ink the night before, after seeing his sister's face in the stone vessel. I feel as though I'm walking toward something I once lost, long before I knew I had lost it. The woman read the words over his shoulder, nodded slowly, and whispered, Your sister wrote something very similar. Elias's breath caught. She wrote here? A soft murmur passed through the elders. The white-haired man rose slowly, leaning on a carved wooden staff, and beckoned Elias to follow. She did not stay long, he said. Her spirit was restless, her grief too fresh. But she left something behind. They walked together along a narrow path leading up a gentle slope. The woman followed behind them, her steps soundless on the moss-covered ground. The path ended at a small shelter crafted from intertwining branches and bark, its doorway draped with strands of dried herbs. Inside, the shelter was dim but warm. Carvings lined the walls, simple shapes, spirals, handprints like those on the fallen tree he had passed earlier. And near the back, resting atop a folded wool cloth, lay a small leather-bound notebook. Elias reached for it with trembling fingers. It was his sister's handwriting. The moment he opened it, her voice rushed back into his mind, soft, hopeful, trembling with awe. He read the first page. If you ever find this, Elias, then the ridge has chosen you too. His throat tightened. The elders remained silent, giving him space to absorb the words. He flipped to another page. There are people here who live between remembering and forgetting. They know our name. They knew it before we were born. Elias closed the book, pressing it gently to his heart. The weight of her journey settled over him, not as a burden, but as a thread tying them together across time and silence. She was searching for these people, he whispered. The silver-haired woman shook her head softly. She was searching for herself, she said. As you are. Elias looked up, confusion flickering in his tired eyes. What do you mean? The woman stepped closer, her voice a soft tremble of wind and warmth. Your family came from these mountains, Elias, long ago, before the hollow withdrew from the world. Your sister felt the old pull first. You feel it now. Elias staggered slightly, gripping the staff beside him. My family. The elder nodded. You are not a stranger to the ridge, he murmured. You are a returning echo. The words settled into Elias like warm rain, sinking deep, stirring memories he didn't know he'd buried. The ridge seemed to hush around him, listening, waiting, remembering. The words, You are a returning echo, stayed with Elias long after the elder fell silent. They hovered in the air like warm mist, clinging to the quiet spaces between his thoughts. He stood there inside the small shelter, its branches bent like ribs around him, holding his sister's notebook to his chest. The warmth of it radiated into his palms, as though memory itself breathed through the worn leather. Outside, the hollow remained calm. The distant hum of voices floated like a faint breeze, weaving through the trees. Elias stepped out of the shelter slowly, blinking against the soft daylight. The silver-haired woman stood nearby, waiting not with impatience, but with the gentle steadiness of someone accustomed to guiding lost souls back to themselves. What did she write? The woman asked quietly. Elias opened the notebook again, flipping through pages filled with his sister's delicate script. Her words trembled with wonder, fear, and something deeper, an ache that mirrored his own. She wrote that she felt called, Elias murmured, like something in the ridge remembered her, like something had been waiting. The woman nodded. It did. The ridge remembers all who share its blood. Elias looked up sharply. My family? How could we have come from here? My parents never spoke of it. They wouldn't, the elder replied gently. Those who left the hollow generations ago made a promise to live quietly, far from these woods, to let the ridge's secrets sleep. He frowned. Why would they leave? The woman's gaze drifted toward the valley below, where the hollow breathed with timeless grace. Some hearts longed for the wider world, she said. For roads, for towns, for voices beyond the whispers of the mountains. And the ridge does not imprison those who wish to go. But leaving comes with a cost, the forgetting. Elias felt a quiet shiver settle across his skin. Forgetting what? The threads that tie your family to this place, she replied. The echoes. The songs. The way the earth speaks when it needs to be heard. He turned back to the shelter. Looking at the carvings, the handprints, the faint scent of herbs his sister had left behind. She must have felt it, he whispered, even if she didn't know why. The woman stepped closer, resting a gentle hand over his. She felt the pull stronger than most who return. Some echoes ring louder, and some are more fragile. Elias's heart tightened. My sister was fragile? Not in spirit, the woman said softly, but in grief. They walked slowly toward the heart of the hollow, where the blue-tinged fire crackled softly. The elders looked up as they approached, their faces calm yet touched with the subtle weight of knowing. Elias sat beside them, his sister's notebook resting like a small heartbeat on his lap. The eldest woman, whose hair was streaked with silver and gold, watched him with the tenderness of someone who had seen many seasons of sorrow and healing. You wish to know what she sought, she said. What she found? Elias nodded, afraid to speak, afraid the truth would shatter him, afraid it wouldn't. The woman lifted a small clay bowl from beside her and held it toward Elias. Inside lay dried petals of a pale blue flower, delicate as frost. She came to us carrying this, the woman said. A blossom only the ridge grows. She said it reminded her of your mother's garden. Elias blinked, stunned. My mother? She grew these? Not precisely, the woman whispered, but she grew their kin. The old flowers, those that made the hollow breathe through generations. Elias felt the earth sway beneath him. His family's roots were deeper than he could have imagined, woven into soil and stone long before they had, scattered into towns and cities. What was she looking for? He asked again, voice trembling. The elder placed the bowl gently into his hands. She sought to remember, the woman said. Something she felt slipping away since childhood. A dream, a hum, the echo of a lullaby. Elias closed his eyes, hearing the distant tune again, the one he had heard in the ridge, layered and soft, the way he remembered his mother humming in the dark. The memory hit him like a warm ache. She came here, the elder continued, to ask the ridge why she felt called, to understand why she dreamed of faces she had never seen, voices she had never heard. And did she? Elias whispered. Did she find answers? The elder's silence was long, and in that silence, Elias felt the weight of truth forming. She did, the elder finally said. But the truth was too heavy for her sorrowing heart. Elias's breath stilled. She wasn't afraid, the woman added softly. She was overwhelmed. The ridge showed her memories that were not entirely her own. Lives her bloodline had lived, bonds her ancestors had woven. The hollow welcomed her. But grief clouded her vision. Elias felt his throat tighten, the ache of missing her swelling like a storm. She left, the woman said gently, not because she was unwelcome, but because she believed she was unworthy of staying. Elias bowed his head, his tears falling softly onto the stone beneath him. The elders watched in respectful silence, letting his grief wash through him like rain cleansing an old wound. When he finally looked up, breath trembling, he asked the question that had haunted him since he arrived. Is her spirit here? The elder did not smile, nor did she look away. Her eyes softened like twilight settling over the ridge. She is not lost, the woman whispered. But she is not here in body. What remains of her is woven into the ridge's remembering, into the echoes. Elias closed his eyes. For a long moment, the hollow was silent, breathing, listening. Then the woman spoke again, her voice like the soft rustle of leaves. And now, Elias Thornwood, it is time for you to hear what the ridge remembers. About you. The blue fire flickered. The hollow leaned in, and Elias felt the world pause, just long enough for truth to draw its first breath. Evening settled over the hollow like a long, slow sigh, as if the mountain itself were preparing for something it had been, waiting years to remember. The blue fire dimmed to embers, leaving behind a silver glow that clung to the stones like drifting moonlight. Elias sat near the hearth, his sister's notebook open on his lap, though he was no longer reading. The elder's words lingered in him, Stirring things he had never known were sleeping inside his own bones. The silver-haired woman settled beside him. Her presence felt less like a person and more like a warm blanket draped over chilled shoulders, quiet, grounding, patient. "Elias," she whispered, "there is something you must understand before the night deepens." He looked up, swallowing the dryness in his throat. "What is it?" She reached out, touching the center of his chest gently with 2 fingers. The gesture was soft, reverent, as though she were feeling for an echo rather than a heartbeat. "The ridge remembered your name long before you were born," she said. "You have felt it all your life." Little moments you might not have noticed. Pauses, dreams, the feeling of being watched, not with fear, but with familiarity. Elias's breath stilled. A memory flickered. Him as a child standing beneath an oak tree, hearing a far-off hum on a windless day. He had told his mother, but she only smiled and said, "Some sounds choose us." He had forgotten that moment until now. The elder continued, her voice soft as moss beneath bare feet. "The night your sister crossed into the ridge." She recognized the hum for what it was. A call, an inheritance. But she carried too much sorrow to stay. Elias lowered his eyes. "She never told me." "She couldn't," the woman said. "Some truths can only be heard here." The last ember of the blue fire pulsed once, then faded to a glowing thread. As it dimmed, something changed in the air, an almost imperceptible shift, like the moment before a storm when the world holds its breath. The hollow grew still. Children stopped their weaving. The stream's soft babble quieted as if listening. The woman rose, motioning for Elias to follow. "It is time," she said. "For what?" he whispered, his voice trembling despite him. "To hear the ridge itself." She led him through the hollow, up a narrow path lined with lanterns carved from hollowed gourds, each filled with a pale, shimmering light that breathed rather than burned. Many of the people followed in silence, elders, parents, children. They moved together like a single slow heartbeat ascending the mountain. At the top of the path lay a small plateau overlooking the valley below. The night sky stretched above them, deep and vast, stars shimmering faintly behind a veil of drifting mist. Elias stepped forward, feeling the world expand and narrow at once. In the center of the plateau stood a circle of stones, ancient, weathered, arranged with intention older than written history. Each stone was marked with faint carvings, similar to the ones he had traced his fingers. Over at the entrance to Whispering, ridge, spirals, lines, curves that breathed like veins. The elders stood around the circle, their presence solemn. The eldest among them lifted her hand, and the ridge answered. A hum rose from the earth, not loud, not sharp, but deep and resonant, like a vibration settling into the bones. Elias felt it before he heard it. The hum traveled through the stones, through the ground beneath his feet, through the air that wrapped around him like warm dusk. He gasped softly. The sound was the same hum he had followed since entering the ridge, the same hum that had stirred his memory by the stone vessel, the same hum his mother used to echo unknowingly in her lullabies. It was familiar. Anciently familiar. The crowd of hollow dwellers bowed their heads, many placing hands over their hearts. Elias felt instinct tug at him until he mirrored them, pressing his palm gently to his chest. The hum rose higher, joined by layers, tones that felt human but not entirely mortal, like voices carried through stone, earth, and time. A single tear slipped down Elias's cheek. The elder stepped forward, her face luminous in the pale light. "This," she whispered, "is the mountain's breath, the voice of what came before us. What shaped the hollow? What shaped your family?" Elias's chest tightened around a sudden, overwhelming ache. "My family?" he whispered. "But how could we be connected to something like this?" The elder smiled gently, a smile that held centuries. "Because you were listeners. Every generation a few of your blood could hear the ridge, feel it, carry its memory inside them like a quiet flame. Your sister was one, you are another." Memory forming patterns behind his eyelids. The darkness behind his eyes grew textured, layered, shifting like a dream. He saw a woman. Not his sister. Not his mother. Someone older. Someone whose face was familiar in a way that made his breath break. Her eyes looked like his sister's. Her smile looked like his mother's. Her hair fell long and dark, braided with small white flowers he remembered from childhood gardens. She reached out a hand, soft, steady, gentle, and touched the space over his heart. A warmth spread beneath her fingers, traveling through him like a slow river. Her lips parted. Her voice was the hum itself, low, human, and impossibly ancient. "You hear us? Because you remember." Elias swallowed, tears threatening. "Remember what?" he whispered, though no air left his lungs. "Who you were, who you are, who you were meant to be." The scene shifted. The woman melted into mist, replaced by a forest. This forest, untouched by time. Cabins stood where the hollow now rested. Children played near a stream. Laughter drifted through the trees. And among them, a small group stood apart, singing into the earth, pressing their hands to stones that glowed with faint, warm light. Listeners. That was the word that formed in Elias's mind, though no one spoke it. The vision blurred, reshaped. He saw generations, hundreds of years passing like gentle breaths. Some people stayed, some left, and those who left carried a faint echo in their blood, a quiet hum beneath their heartbeat. A hum that sometimes grew stronger in moments of sorrow or longing. His family. He saw them. A line of faces, some familiar, some forgotten, stretching back into the ridge's history. His great-grandfather as a boy, barefoot and curious. His grandmother as a young woman weaving a charm from reeds. His mother as a child singing to the forest. Each one holding a small part of the ridge's remembering without knowing why. Then he saw his sister, her face soft with wonder, then sorrow, her tears falling onto the same stone circle where he now stood. She reached out, touching the earth. "I can't stay," her voice whispered in his mind. But maybe he can. Elias's breath shook, fragile as a leaf. The vision faded. The hum drifted downward, thinning until it became a soft, steady heartbeat beneath the ground. The wind grew gentle again, the lantern steadied, and the plateau exhaled. Elias opened his eyes. The hollow folk were watching him with quiet reverence. The elder woman stepped forward, her hand hovering near his shoulder but not quite touching. "The ridge has spoken," she said softly. "It remembers you." Elias wiped at his damp cheeks, shaking slightly. I saw them." "All of them. My family. My sister." The elder nodded. "Memory is not a line here. It is a circle, a breath. Those who listen become threads in that circle." Elias looked down at his hands, as if expecting to find them marked. They weren't, but he felt something under his skin, a quiet pulse that wasn't quite his own. "What does it want from me?" he whispered. The elder's expression softened further, a shadow of sorrow hiding in the corners of her eyes. "Not want," she said. "Remember, the ridge does not command. It invites." He looked up, confused and aching. "Invites me to but stay?" The elder hesitated, then nodded. "To stay, to listen, to become part of what your blood once protected." Elias's heart hammered painfully. "And if I leave?" The elder's gaze grew heavier. Not cold, never that. Just real. "Then the hum will follow you all your life," she whispered. Softly, always. A longing without name, a call without end. He lowered his head, tears falling softly to the stone. The wind brushed his hair, tender as a hand. The elder touched his shoulder at last. "Your sister could not stay because grief clouded her path," she said. "But you, Elias—" "The ridge hopes you might see clearly." Elias inhaled deeply, the mountain air filling his lungs like gentle fire. The hum rose again, quiet, patient, waiting. The wind gentled against Elias's cheek, brushing away the last of his tears. Like a mother smoothing? The sleep from her child's face. The plateau of stones quieted, though the hum lingered beneath it, soft, steady, patient. It pulsed faintly through the soles of his shoes, like the echo of a far-off heartbeat he had not realized belonged, in some small way, to him. Elias stood a long while, eyes lifted toward the treetops where the stars flickered like distant lanterns. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't even overwhelmed anymore. The ridge had shown him pieces of his past, his family's past, woven into the deep roots of the mountain-like threads, braided into an eternal tapestry. But the question remained, hovering between his ribs like a weight that refused to settle. "What happens to me if I stay?" He turned toward the elders, their faces illuminated by soft lantern glow. They watched him with compassion, not expectation. No one here demanded anything of him. The ridge, too, offered only invitation, never command. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, the firelight glimmering like stardust in her eyes. "If you stay," she whispered, "you become part of the hollow's remembering, part of its voice, part of its breath." "Will I vanish?" Elias murmured. "Disappear the way my sister did?" The woman's eyes softened, sadness folding into their corners like the faint wrinkles of early dawn. "She did not vanish," she said. "She left, and the ridge let her go, but her echo remained, as yours will, should you choose to leave." Elias looked down at his hands, imagining that faint glowing thread beneath the skin, the one that had pulsed when the ridge whispered his name. There was no mark, no symbol burned into him, only the knowledge that he was connected to something older than memory. He whispered, "What does it mean to become part of the ridge?" The elder woman inhaled deeply, as though gathering the right words from the air. "It means living as we live," she said softly. "Listening, stewarding the old songs, walking the trails where echoes rise, protecting the quiet places. It is not confinement. It is communion. And if I leave?" The wind moved again, carrying with it a faint hint of rosemary and earth. "If you leave," she murmured, "you return to a world that will not understand what you carry. The hum will follow you softly always. Some nights you will hear your sister's voice in the wind. Some mornings you will wake and feel the ridge's breath beneath your heartbeat. You will live between two worlds, but belong fully to neither." Elias swallowed hard. The truth settled into him with a quiet heaviness, not cruel, simply real. He glanced toward the hollow below. Lanterns flickered near the cabins. Smoke curled like silk into the twilight. People moved slowly, peacefully, with a rhythm untouched by haste or hunger for the world outside. Children played with woven charms. Elders tended small gardens. Couples walked barefoot over soft moss. Heads leaned gently together. Life here was not loud, but it was full. And Elias realized with a start that the hollow felt strangely like home, a kind of home he had never known. He needed until this moment. He opened his sister's notebook, flipping through the delicate pages one last time. Her words, trembling and luminous, seemed to glow in the dim light. "If you ever find this, Elias, you'll understand why I had to come." A soft breath escaped him. Grief and love blended into one gentle ache. He whispered into the pages, "I understand." The elder woman placed a hand over his journal, her touch warm. "She would be at peace knowing you found the truth," she said, "and knowing you came not out of fear, but out of love." He closed the notebook slowly. A silence settled between them, comfortable, warm, like being wrapped in a familiar blanket on a cold night. Finally, Elias stepped away from the stone circle. The hollow folk parted to make room for him, not pushing him forward, not pulling him back, simply opening the path for whatever choice he made. He walked toward the ridge's edge and looked out across the vast expanse of darkened forest. The trees rustled softly, whispering his name with the gentlest breath. Fireflies drifted lazily around him, painting tiny constellations in the shadows. Behind him, the elder spoke, her voice faint like soft rain. "Whatever you choose, the ridge will remember you." Elias closed his eyes. He listened. He listened to the hum, to the song beneath the earth, to the echo of his sister's laughter hidden in the wind, to the rhythm of a lineage older than he had ever known. When he opened his eyes, he felt something inside him shift, like a door gently clicking open. He turned toward the hollow. The elders watched, still and silent. The hollow folk held their breath. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Elias inhaled deeply, and with a soft, steady voice he whispered, "I'll stay." A sigh moved through the hollow, light, relieved, almost joyful. The lanterns flickered brighter. The stones beneath his feet warmed, and for the first time, the hum rose with unmistakable welcome. The ridge had spoken, and now so had he. Elias Thornwood walked back into the hollow, lanterns glowing gently in the dusk, becoming not a visitor, not a wanderer, but a remembering, a thread woven back into the mountain's quiet tapestry, a part of the whispering. Once more and finally home. Night drifted gently over Whispering Ridge, laying its cool hands across the treetops like a blessing. The hollow had grown quiet, though not silent, the kind of quiet that holds warmth, breath, and the small movements of a world at peace with itself. Lanterns glowed faintly outside each cabin, their soft amber halos trembling in the breeze, like tiny hearths guiding wandering spirits home. Elias Thornwood sat beside the blue-tinged fire, now rekindled in a low, steady pulse. His sister's notebook lay open beside him, though he no longer needed its words to understand her journey. The ridge had spoken to him in ways paper could never fully capture. It had shown him the threads that tied his blood to the mountain, to the hollow, to the echoes hidden beneath the earth. He breathed slowly, letting the scent of cedar and smoke fill his lungs. For the first time in many years, his chest felt light. Children ran barefoot through the moss nearby, their laughter as soft as wind chimes. Elders sat beneath the great cedar, weaving charms from reeds and twine. A young woman dipped her lantern into the stream, letting drops glimmer along the surface like scattered stars. Life here moved without hurry, without ache. Elias touched the stone beneath him, warm, living, pulsing with the hum he now recognized as a heartbeat older than history. The ridge welcomed him not as an outsider, not even as a lost descendant, but as a returning melody, a note finally finding its place in the song. He gazed toward the dark silhouette of the forest, where shadows shifted gently but never threatened, where his sister had once walked alone, overwhelmed by grief. He now walked with acceptance, held by a community that listened deeply and spoke rarely. "If you ever find this, Elias," her words drifted through him, soft as mist, "you'll understand." He did. He understood her longing, her sorrow, her wonder. And somewhere in the distance, in the hush between two breaths, he felt her echo settle into him, like a warm hand across his heart. Elias closed his eyes. The ridge hummed. The hollow breathed. And he at last belonged to the remembering, a life not vanished, but returned. And as the night settles once more over the quiet shoulders of the Appalachians, as the last embers fade into the soft breath of the ridge, we leave Elias Thornwood where he chose to remain, listening, remembering, and becoming a part of the mountain's quiet song. If this journey guided your thoughts toward stillness, if it carried you a little deeper into the mystery, or a little closer to sleep, let this channel stay beside you too. There are countless forgotten stories folded into the dark corners of history, echoes waiting for ears willing to listen. And every week, we bring one back to life, softly, gently, the way old memories deserve to return. So before you drift off completely, tap that like button. It tells the mountain's algorithms that this tale found a home. And if you'd like more stories whispered the way this one was, subscribe and let your nights grow a little quieter, a little deeper, and a little more full of wonder. Rest well tonight wherever you are. May the echoes fade softly, and may your dreams carry you somewhere warm and waiting. Good night, and until we meet again, follow the hum.